do you know if you're really a Christian? Hey everybody, Pastor Phil here, and I want to welcome you to Season 9, Episode 2 of our study through the book of Acts. Now, the last time we were together, we met Saul of Tarsus, who was both a radical rabbi and a very violent murderer. Today, as the story unfolds, we're going to see how Saul, a restless, unhappy, abusive, violent man, was completely transformed into a man who was loving and compassionate and ultimately content and at peace. So let's read together from Acts chapter 9. As he was approaching Damascus on this mission, a light from heaven suddenly shone around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. And the voice replied, "I am Jesus, the one you are persecuting. Now, get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." The men with Saul stood speechless, for they heard the sound of someone's voice, but saw no one. Saul picked himself up off the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he was blind. So his companions led him by the hand to Damascus. He remained there blind for 3 days, and did not eat or drink. What was it that ultimately started this massive transformation in Saul's life, where he went from Saul to Paul, from angry, violent man to loving, compassionate missionary? The answer is one simple word: conversion. Second question: how do you know if you're truly a Christian? It's the same answer: conversion. Now, conversion simply means to be completely transformed from the inside out. All true Christians have been converted by the gospel, and only Christians have been converted by the gospel. And you are not a Christian unless or until you've been converted by the gospel. Conversion is really that simple. I do need to say that there is kind of a problem when it comes to studying the conversion of Saul, and that problem is that it is so stinking dramatic. Sometimes we can compare our own conversion experience to the one that Saul had and conclude we must be missing out. And the good news is that Luke shows us that there's lots of other conversions that occurred throughout this span of history. He shows us people like Lydia and Cornelius and the Ethiopian treasurer to show us that there's all kinds of different ways that people get converted. In fact, we see a lot of the people in Acts were converted simply through casual conversation or Bible study. And we need to remember that every authentic Christian conversion is miraculous. They are all spectacular. They are all life-changing in their own way. They don't all have to have the bells and the whistles that Saul's story has. But today I want to briefly look at 3 common encounters that every true Christian has in their conversion experience. And they're all right here in this passage. Every authentic Christian conversion experience includes 3 encounters: a God encounter, a truth encounter, and a love encounter. We experience a God encounter when we are converted by encountering and believing in the real God of the Bible. When Saul's on the road to Damascus and the bright light appears and he hears the voice, his first question is what? "Who are you, Lord?" Now, up to this point, as we've said before, Paul deeply loved God. He loved him with all his heart, soul, and strength. He was a rabbi. He was a Jew. He was a Pharisee. He had tons of religious education, had memorized the Old Testament. He was very confident that he knew exactly who God was and exactly who he wasn't. And yet, despite all of Paul's conclusions about who he thought God was, on the road to Damascus, he meets a God who has his own reality, and that God knocks him completely to the ground. The last thing any of us need is a God that is exactly the way we want him to be. Now, why is that? Because a God who is exactly the way we want him to be, he will always agree with you, he will never challenge you, and he will never change you. You and I don't need a God that's exactly the way we want him to be. We need a God who is exactly how he is. And where do we find that kind of a God? We look in the Bible. The second encounter that Paul has in this passage is a truth encounter. We are converted when we respond to the historical fact of the resurrected Jesus. When Saul asks, "Who are you, Lord?" the answer he gets is, "I am Jesus." Saul is having a real experience with a physical light that blinded him. He also encounters a sound that both he hears along with the entire group traveling with him. Christian conversion is not a response to an experience. It's a response to the objective, historic reality of a resurrected Jesus Christ as recorded in the Gospels and witnessed by hundreds and hundreds of people over a 40-day time period. So how does this work exactly? Well, when Saul was on the road to Damascus, we have to remember he had a ton of objections to God, and he had a lot of unanswered questions about Christianity. And that's true of many of us and many of the people that we're trying to convert to Christianity. People have all kinds of objections to Jesus. Things like, why would a good God allow evil things to happen? Or how can I join the church when I've seen so many horrible things done by Christians over the years? Saul had objections too. And yet in the middle of all of those objections, there's Jesus, alive and bright and speaking to him. When Jesus appears to Saul, does he say, "Let me answer all your questions, Saul, that you have about the Trinity"? Or, "Let me explain to you how the Old Testament really works"? He doesn't do any of those things. And yet there he is. So now Saul is confronted with this idea of, I've got all these problems and I don't understand how this all works out, and I don't even know what I believe doctrinally, but there he is. This must be true. Saul was converted the moment he realized that Jesus truly was raised from the dead. Let me ask you a question. Do you believe that Jesus was really raised from the dead? If so, then all of your other objections, they really don't matter. You just have to put your faith and your trust in Jesus. On the other hand, if you say, "I just don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead," now you're faced with the challenge of having to supply another explanation for how the Christian church began. And if that's the case in your life, I'm inviting you simply to engage in a relentless pursuit of the truth, because I believe the truth will convert you if you'll simply listen to the evidence. The third and final encounter that Saul has on the road to Damascus is a love encounter. We are converted by encountering God's intimate love for us that forms a radical new union between us. The question Jesus asks Saul isn't, "Why are you persecuting Christians?" He asks Saul, "Why are you persecuting me?" Saul must be wondering, why is Jesus taking this so personally? What Jesus is saying to Saul, and by extension to all of us, is that he has such an intimate relationship and union with his people that he is in them and they are in him. They're one. They're in union. So much so that whatever you say about Jesus's people, it's like you're saying it about him. And whatever God sees in Jesus, he sees in Jesus's people. And it's that type of radical love that forms the basis in all of Saul's and Paul's writing for years and years to come, for the rest of his life. It's like the more that he thought about that love and processed it, the more that it converted him. So as we close this part of our study together, I want to ask you, have you truly encountered the love of Jesus in a way that radically converts and transforms you? Do you understand that you and I are described by Paul in his later writing as children that have been adopted into Jesus's family by his generous Father? That the moment that God decided to adopt you and adopt me through no effort of your own or my own, we got a new name, we got a new family, we got a new identity. We became indescribably wealthy, and we became heirs of everything that God wants to pass along to all of his children. You see, being a Christian is something that is received. It's not achieved. At the very least, I hope this short study in Acts chapter 9 has helped you to identify and to assess the value that various God encounters and truth encounters and love encounters have had upon your spiritual journey up to this point in your life. And my prayer for you is that you'll continue to be hungry and thirsty to know the God of the Bible. We have exactly as much of him as we want, no more, no less. So draw near to him and watch as he draws near to you.